Before we begin, the Gamer's Advocate would like to remind you that any episode could contain game spoilers, so watch or listen with discretion. And now your hosts, AMKomnenos, Banana, and Legion. Enjoy the show.
Not going to mention how often he dies for me. The conclusion will be, Banana plays very stupid.
Yeah, and don't tell everyone you are also playing on story mode. Yeah, he's found a role where he doesn't have to sit in the House of Commons or in Congress. He gets to go out there and lead a gang to kick the shit out of things, which I think for him is perfect. They seem like a parliamentary democracy.
Yeah, isn't the collective noun for Krogans a parliament?
Don't forget I made a mistake. I'm going to need that.
Yeah, that also works. Cobb's character growth.
Yeah.
Condensed into 4 seconds.
I appreciate y'all giving your insights to this.
I thought you were going to say,
we called in the
I
map.
appreciate you getting this one right. I mean, don't get me wrong. She's beautiful. But this Justicar almost feels like this anime character. And her outfit was so meh.
I wanted like wings and stuff.
I wanted
giant
absolutely
metal shoulder
over
pads.
the top. Like, immediately you know that's a Justicar.
Yeah, Sephiroth hair with the fringe going up and then down. I want all of it. I want a tail. Oh,
I don't know about all of that, but I wanted something else.
Well, welcome to another one of the Gamers Advocates Mass Effect tier list. We're going over Mass Effect 2. We had way too much to talk about. There were so many companions in Mass Effect 2 that we had to break it up. There will be a Mass Effect 3 companion tier list as well, believe it or not, and we'll cover that sometime in the future. And if you like the content, give it a like. Subbing is always free in YouTube. Comments are greatly appreciated, and they really help move the needle of the algorithm because YouTube loves to see engagement. So if you like the video, tell us you like the video. If you hate the video, tell us that you hate the video. If there's a companion or two that you disagreed with, definitely put that in the comments. Thank you very much. When you first get this quest, you are kind of told that you're supposed to deal with one person, and then you end up dealing with a different one. But Grunt is who you acquire, but you're actually there for the warlord. And he's, you're trying to negotiate his passage, which only can include the Krogan specimen that's in stasis. But because the warlord dies during that mission, you have the choice of, you have to bring him with you, but you have the choice to either activate him or not, which ends up being Grunt. And Grunt is supposed to be the perfect Krogan. He does look differently, but of course that's because he's younger than most of the Krogan that you encounter. But it is interesting, you don't meet any other Krogan that even remotely look like him. He's an intimidating figure for sure. He doesn't look nearly as big as Rex, but he's clearly just as capable. But he does things if you do them in a certain way. I love all these like little tiny lore dumps with Grunt. If you kill the Thresher Maul,
If you kill Beetlejuice.
Yeah, if you kill the Thresher Maul during his trials, they'll tell you like, oh, this is the first Krogan to have done that since Rex. It's really interesting. So you're always going to be comparing the two, but they are completely different. But they both are, I think, very equally beloved because Grunt is definitely a slow burn. He's not hard. You don't hate him. There's nothing about him that you would immediately hate. He's always, even when he's aggressive with you, you can work with him. I'm telling you, there's Grunt on the battlefield in any mission. It's amazing. He rarely dies for me unless I'm just playing stupid or something's going on. He handles it. I don't think it's an S tier, but I do say he's an A because he's highly versatile. Even if you play soldier, you can use him. So
I love Grunt so much. He's not quite up there with Morden for me because I don't think he's as interesting as Morden is. But in terms of just a character of pure pleasure, pure fun, I don't know if anyone compares to Grunt. And I noted down 2 things which I think sum Grunt up for me. And this doesn't relate to combat, so this is going to be just who he is and what I find interesting about his character. So we're not looking for fun again, we're not looking for simple, we're looking for what's interesting. And I think the first thing is he knows everything, essentially. He's had all this knowledge poured into his system, but he knows no one. He is dropped into this world. It's a bit like you when you start playing as Commander Shepard. Commander Shepard knows everything, but you know nothing about where you are. You have complete unfamiliarity with the characters, the world, etc. But your avatar knows everything that your avatar knows, and that whole codex is there. This is essentially what's happened to him. He's been birthed from this tank with all this knowledge, but really no idea of what to do with it. No idea what it all really means. And the true joy and interest outside of just the fun of Grunt for me is the fact that he's such a simple being searching for meaning and actually what he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to do. And his quest, if you can call it that, to find out who he is, I love it so much. I think he's an astounding character.
Yeah, I immediately enjoy Grunt. I feel like Grunt is one of those characters that you almost gravitate towards because of how foreign they are, how alien they are to you. Grunt is, like Com said, dropped into the world as almost the perfect version of his race, and knowing tremendously more than almost any member of his race actually knows, but not given any direction. You're the first person he meets, and you have your goal, which is not really the goals of the Krogan race. And immediately Grunt says, yeah, I can work with that, and joins your crew. I think that is such a strange, very, very difficult to relate to point of view, to say that I am extraordinarily capable. What do I do with this? I don't think I've ever felt that way. I think even in the areas where I consider myself capable, I typically have an idea, and that idea is what got me to be capable. Whereas Grunt is exceptional immediately and doesn't know how to use that. That's immediately endearing to me, to have somebody who's this tremendously unique outlier of just humanoid experience.
I think that's a pretty interesting thought, actually, is what you were saying about him latching onto you. Essentially, you're taking on this almost surrogate parent approach as he comes out of the tank. Makes eyes with you. Perfect. This is Mama. Great. And then when you know nothing about his culture, beyond what little bit Rex has taught you, I can't decide if that makes you the worst or the best possible role model for him. Because you're going to make him a pretty bad Krogan. In the end, this isn't how it works out, but you're going to make him a pretty bad Krogan. But that's probably for the good. So it's quite an odd position to be in. And I think the thing that really sums it up for me is how useless you are to him. He doesn't make you feel this way. In the end, it turns out that you are incredibly useful to him and you really help his development. But you know nothing about his home, Tachanka. I remember that when I first went there with Grunt, I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't it to be that. It just looks like a sand trap on a golf course. And not much else. It's a ruin. The throne's like a rock. And there's a couple of people betting on Varen fights. And I think that's about all there is. And you knew none of this when you arrived. You're coming in with exactly the same kind of ignorance that he's coming in with. You couldn't have told him any stories about his home, what it was going to be like. You can't tell him any stories about his people because you don't know any of them, except for Rex, who, oddly enough, isn't your typical Krogan. So yeah, he comes out, as you said, perfect in every way, but with no foundation in the world. Thoroughly interesting character.
I think he's also perfect in not just physical. There is a mental process that's going on, and that's why I think the Warlord was so proud of him, because I think he was able to kind of capture a lot of things that are like Rex, basically. But most Krogan aren't like Rex. They're not thinkers. They're doers. And he's a thinker because he actually has a dialogue with Shepard in his cabin that says, realize something. What'd you realize? What'd you realize, Grunt? I hate Turians.
Yes.
I had this vision of me. They had killed one of our female shaman, and then our pack found the Turians, and we killed him. And he went through this whole description. It's like, I get it. I hate Turians. And then you can say a shepherd is like, well, you better leave Garrus alone. I don't hate Garrus. I hate Turians. And like he's piecing together, so he is thinking about that. So the typical Krogan would just look at Garrus and say, I hate Garrus. But he's separating his culture identity from the logical conclusion of where that should not be placed. And that's a thinker. And Grunt is a thinker, believe it or not. So I think he's perfect in more than just one way, not just physical, but also in a lot of, and so he's the one who is likely, should be, I mean, you already see it in Mass Effect 3. He's got a, where he's leading a squadron, an almost suicide type mission, and he survives. But I think he's going to be the future leader.
Yeah. Which, by the way, that moment where you are convinced he hasn't survived was a cruel joke. How fucking dare you?
Yeah. But I think the writing's clearly on the wall. He's the future of the Krogan in more ways than one. In Mass Effect 4, I do believe that you'll see him, maybe Rex in retirement. But
I really hope he comes back in Mass Effect 4.
I would not expect to see Rex, because I feel like Rex's story almost reached a satisfying conclusion. But I would definitely expect to see Grunt as the continuation of Rex's vision.
Well, I think we only ever get to see Grunt as a child. It would be lovely to see who he becomes. I'm just thinking of the moment when he meets Rex on Tachanka, and it's something like, who are you? And his response is, I am the purest of Krogan. You should be in awe of me. And it's just the most idiotic thing that you could now say, but it's so childlike. Mm-hmm. It's just, this is who I am. I have no filter, and I will say this thing. And I want to see who he's become in those following hundreds of years. But I think there's one thing that would make me a bit sad, and it's the same thing that pushes me away from Shepard being the next evolution of humanity. It's the same thing. I don't want Grunt to be the leader of the Krogan. I don't want Grunt to be in that role because he's special. I don't want the next leader of the Krogan who goes and turns them into the next stage of who they are to be special. I want not someone tank formed. I want someone who came out of the normal Krogan world and became that person in and of themselves. Because it's just such a bad message that for them to become that better society, they needed a scientifically lab-bred version of who they are, rather than an actual Krogan.
Well, I think where the Warlord was coming from was saying, look, the genophage has forced us to coddle our young. The proverbial, what does he say? The proverbial teat, as you would say. Like we say that. but I think where he's coming from is that we're not creating biodiversity. We're never going to get to that the way the genophage is doing that. So rather than produce pure numbers like Sarum was trying to do, or the genophage project, fixing that would do, he says, let's just create one Grey Krogan. I think we can get further with that than we can with waiting forever on this genetic change. So he's not forcing the issue. He's saying everything's there.
I'm not saying I don't see his logic. I just find it thoroughly depressing. If that's the only way that they can improve.
The story makes sense if Grunt acts as an example and not a leader, because Grunt is an outsider. And I feel like for the Krogan to truly move forward, they need to adopt what makes Grunt special into what it means to be Krogan. And I think if you have him in a leadership role, that's not really what you're doing. You're just saying this special one is going to lead us, and when he's gone, we're fucked. And that's not really how that works. Like, we don't want to see regression in the Krogan. And I also think that because Grunt is an outsider, he gives this really unique deconstruction of Krogan culture and Krogan priorities that you don't see anywhere else, because Grunt is kind of imbued with that knowledge of Krogan culture, and he is born knowing that it's important but not knowing why, because it's not it's not presented to him in the same way it was every other Krogan. So he looks at these things almost through the filter of Shepard to say, I have this idea, I know it's important, why is it important? And then bases his conclusions off his experience with Shepard to say, maybe it's not actually that important, or maybe it's important for these reasons, and those need to be the things that the Krogan focus on moving forward. And I feel like Grunt serving almost as a philosophical leader as opposed to an organizational leader just makes for a better story overall, to say, yeah, it makes sense. He is a shining example of what Krogan can be if they embrace things that they've decided aren't Krogan.
I think that really actually goes nicely with Legion's example. Well, the two things Legion said, which was about him actually having something going on in the mind that the Doctor is so proud of. And then that almost becomes his defining characteristic, is him as, like we say, it's a bit broad, but the philosophical leader of the Krogans, and also his I hate Turians. But it's filtered then through the fact that he's now met one. And his experience with Shepard, rather than just being growing up on Tachonga with the full I hate Turians, full stop. Grunt comes with a comma after I hate Krogans. He comes with a secondary sentence.
Yeah, and I think that is the shining example of kind of abandoning the conclusions for the process. To say that I hate Turians, Grunt goes on to say, Garrus isn't a Turian. Garrus isn't what I hate. I hate Turians. It's really like he's looking for the right word and he doesn't know what it is. The only word he has is Turians. But the reality is that he hates those specific Turians because of what they did. Not all Turians. He just doesn't have the tools at his disposal to form that thought, because he's been programmed to say, I hate Turians.
This conversation is only pushing him up in my rankings. I liked him already, but this is only helping.
Yeah, the end of his trials, you do get the option when you're talking to the battle master, who's the rival for Rex. And he's up front. He tells, hey, look, I don't care about you as the perfect Krogan. I just need you on my side. They're going to use him. We're going to use you to, because before you make the arguments, like, I thought you didn't want to tank bread on your team. Well, he's not going to take any position. We're just going to use his abilities. So that's what I'm saying, is that I think he will take a leadership position, because just using him for his abilities is what he's already been presented with. And if you ask him, what do you want to do? He's going to shoot the guy in the face. He wants his own future. And the Krogan society puts the strongest, toughest, most capable person in their leadership spot. And there's nobody going to be better than Grunt for that. So again, we can disagree of like whether they should. I'm just telling you that I think that's what's going to happen. It's just natural for that society to do that.
I mean, it's definitely possible. It's probably one of the more likely results, but I think the reality is we've never seen Grunt show an interest in that type of role. So when they say, what do you want to do? He's probably going to say something along the lines of, I want to go live my own life and be the Krogan that people look up to. I'm just not going to tell them about myself. I'm not going to give orders. I'm not going to try to convince them of what I already know. I'm just going to go live my life according to what I already know. And they had better understand why I'm doing it. They'll be better for watching me than they will for listening.
Well, in that short term, like I said, in Mass Effect 3, he's the leader of that secret squad of Krogan, a special elite Krogan. So he's already doing it. He's already the leader among them.
Oh, that's a different role.
I would say he's a leader of a small team, and he is very much embracing that role of, let's show them what Krogan can do.
Yeah, he's
So
lucky
it's
enough to-
somewhere between the two options we've presented.
Rex actually says, I mean, I think their form of government is the matriarchs or the female Krogan discussing it for quite a while, and then
Yeah.
they just kind of go along if that makes sense or not. So
Yeah, I feel like that is almost like a core tenet of who Grunt is. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to discuss it. I don't want to philosophize. I just want to go be the person I know I am.
Yeah.
And if the other Krogan recognize that as value, they'll fall in line. Maybe not take orders or anything along those lines, but they'll emulate him. And that's enough.
I think someone like Rex is really the person that you will need, because I do think there's a lot of like
Grunt
little.
or Rex.
I'm sorry, yeah, Rex. I do think Rex could live to that period.
Oh, he definitely could.
Yeah, because I think like Drax, Drax and Andromeda was my favorite character in that one, and it would be neat to see Rex in in his retirement form. But no, I meant Grunt. I'm sorry. Yeah, but
I feel like the Krogan leadership has to. I don't expect it to be Rex. I don't expect it to be Grunt. I expect it to be somebody related to one of them. Maybe Rex's daughter, something along those lines.
that makes sense. That'd be neat.
I expect it to be a Nepo baby. I expect it to be somebody tied to somebody we already have fond memories of.
So Morden Erdnot.
Yeah, it could be Morden.
Oh, that'd be so good.
Morden Erdnot leading the Krogan.
BioWare. If you need ideas. I think we just accidentally brainstormed a masterpiece.
If you need ideas, or if you like red onions, the DMs are open.
So we definitely have Grunt as S, because I'm still saying A, but you guys are saying S, right?
No, I've got him as an A.
But you got him
I
as
have
an
him as an A as well.
A. Okay, so we're all A's. Okay.
I'm just trying to be quite exclusive, like with the S. Try not to hand them out too easily. And I think Grunt, for me, he's on a par with a few characters. He doesn't quite stand above in the way that Morden did.
I think me and Banana are on the same side, is that an S is an S. I could have 20 S's here. They're still an S.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep them relative to each other as much as I can.
Wow.
I do think there has to be that threshold that elevates them to an S, and I feel like just by the nature of what that means, it almost has to be a bit exclusive. Yeah. Not so much because it's not possible for everybody to achieve that tier, as much as it would become a shitty story. If you had exclusively S tier characters,
Yeah.
it would detract from the series.
Yeah, you can't have a bad day without good days. It's the same idea. We normally do that the other way around now I think about it. That's a very pessimistic view, but
I mean, it's true.
There's been several times where I've said that in Mass Effect 3, you're just lacking one or two companions to really flesh out your time on the Normandy. And I think once you do Grunt's mission, he should be with you. His squad died, and you already have the Krogan on your side. Nobody knows the way you do things like Grunt from a previous playthrough. So I really would have liked to have seen him join you in 3. And then at that point, you still have enough lore building with him, and even a bigger arc going into the Citadel DLC, that I could give him an S at that point. They probably would have done something to kind of help us integrate our world with his in Mass Effect 3. It's already lacking some companions, so he would just fill in more than what he already did. I think that would have been the difference, I guess, but didn't play out.
Yeah, I definitely think
I'd
they
agree.
set that framework for Grunt rejoining you very well, too, with that mission that you see him in, losing his team. He almost seems to be the kind of counterpoint to Zaid to say, I'm going to take on the most challenging things I can and prove that I'm better than them. And then you show up again and say, hey, we have the ultimate challenge.
Yeah. So we're going to give him an A. There we go. This character. There's a lot going on with this character from the beginning to the very end. But it's done so quietly that you almost mistake it for a lack of effort on the writer's part to make this person interesting. They're just naturally interesting. There's a ton of dialogue, probably more with this companion than any other one besides Garrus or Liara, which she's not even a companion in Mass Effect 2. But Samara, when you pick up Samara, there is so much going on even before you meet her, right? And I could say that with like people like Thane and stuff, but they're on the Asari planet. They've already got problems with the local police there. And she doesn't want to create an international incident because of you dealing with someone, a Justicar, I almost called her Justiciar, like in Baldur's Gate 3.
I would mix those two up too.
So you have a Justicar who's going to follow their code. And if you're in the way, you're getting dealt with. Now, you're Shepard, you're probably going to win this battle. But my point here is that it's going to create an international incident that the Asari don't want to deal with.
You're going to win this battle, or you're going to play it again until you win the battle.
And then you bring her back, and per her code, she gives you an option. She doesn't even come with you, right, to handle this. She's directly related, and you're kind of like, who is this person that they're so aloof that they'll turn themselves in, but you got to do all the work to kind of, it's really an interesting dynamic that you have with her at the very beginning. And she just becomes more and more interesting as you have her in the group. You find out more about her, find out more about Asari culture, probably than even from Liara, because Liara is very, as we've said before, she's very sheltered and she doesn't always have all the points of view that a normal Asari would. Samara doesn't have that. She has the commando training. She has the political training. She has the Justicar training. So she's kind of everything, and she doesn't hold back about the culture and where it lacks some structure. And she changes a little bit based on her loyalty arc. And once you've done that, if you side with her, then she becomes a little bit more open again. She is one of the hardest people to romance. It's a hard nut to crack. And it's really not worth it. So I don't, it'd be one thing if it was like, this is the way to go. It was hard to get there, but I'm glad we did. It doesn't really.
I feel like I'm just imagining you say that about a real person now. This was a hard romance to manage, and it wasn't worth it.
It wasn't worth it at the end. It was too much energy.
Yeah, also, I do.
Well, I would probably give her I give her a solid B, because I do love the story, the lore dump she gives me. And as powerful of a biotic as she is, I still think people like Jack are better for overall combat, not story stuff. But yeah, she's my choice for a solid B.
I think I am going to have her somewhere a little lower down. I'm not an enormous fan of Samara. I think she's okay. I don't have any particular problems. This isn't despising her. She's not down in Jacob territory, nothing like that. But I just find her a bit underwhelming, especially given her presentation. And you have that weird switch in between what we need for the gameplay and what we need for storytelling. Honestly, I would prefer if she wasn't in the team. I would prefer if she was some other figure who we met who had advice for us. We would see them in cutscenes maybe from time to time, but they weren't a part of the team directly. I think I'd find much more enjoyment in that. Having said that, I think they also miss a beat with her storytelling. I think it should be a lot easier to lose her from the party. I think her code and the rigidity of said code should be a damn consequence that you have to deal with. And if you don't adhere to her code, she's going to leave. And if you don't adhere to the code by some sort of extreme margin, she's going to turn on you. I want that.
Yeah, it's very D&D. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very much not the kind of game that they make in Mass Effect. So it's really not something that's going to happen with her. And it was never something that would have been even considered, I'd imagine, in the game design. But I would love to have seen that. So yeah, for me, she drops down the list because I don't think she functions great as a party member. I think she would have been a better secondary figure, so we could really get to grips with her power. B, because she doesn't, to my opinion, actually have a direct link between her code and how she plays in the game. And when the code is so defining to who she is, I think that's a real shame. She does, however, gain some points for having such a formative role in my evolving sexual tastes.
If we talk about her code, I only think she doesn't say this, and there's no lore for this, but I think she only became a Justicar because her children are Ardak Yakshi. Ardak Yakshi. Because she doesn't want somebody I don't think she wants taking the ability to do justice to her children without her being involved. So no matter how cold she is when presented with that issue, I still think that that's really the reason why she's there. And that's why when I say that she adheres to the code, but she changes a little bit once you do her mission, because now she has one less child. And now she's got to deal with the other two that she might have to dispatch the same way. Now she's questioning her future. I only think she's adopted the code because if she didn't have children that were all Ardak Yakshi, I don't think she would be a Justicar. So
I think that is, her children are, for me, the only thing that really makes her interesting. The Justicar are presented to you in story in a way, like Com said, where she is hyped up beyond belief. When you meet her, everybody is talking about how she could devastate the entire planet, basically. Like, if she can't get to her target, she'll destroy everything in her path. And then she joins your team, and she might die. It's like, all right, you're clearly not the force of nature that everybody just described you as. And then the other thing is that code of the Justicar. That is also hyped up. It's directly alongside her abilities to say that she will follow this code to dangerous degree, to catastrophic degree for everyone around her. She will adhere to the code. You don't even really get to know what the code is. It doesn't play a big role in the game. And her power doesn't play a big role in the game beyond any other biotic. So she is a colossal letdown as a Justicar. The only thing that redeems her from that is her children. She has a tragic story to say that I have 3 children that I love, and they are monsters. And I need to deal with that. And you are presented with really only one encounter into that world as far as how she has to deal with that. In the case of her 2 other daughters, they've made that a lot easier for her, and you can learn about them, but you don't have any responsibility. You don't have to take action. You only have to deal with Morinth. And that is really the only time where I care, is when Samara is faced with this horrific decision. And it's not because she's a Justicar. It's not because she's adhering to this code. It's because she has to take responsibility for her child. That's what makes it interesting. So for me, Samara is a huge letdown because she is billed as this obscenely powerful, incredibly devout follower of this code. And you don't get to see either of those things. You get to see her as a mother, which is interesting, but it's not how she's presented to you. You're not introduced to Samara as a security guard working in the planet, telling you like, man, this mom just tore through here and threw everybody around with her biotics. Nobody talks about her children except her. So your introduction to her is a lie, and I hate that. So I have her way down the list. I put her at a D because she is so disappointing for me in the way that she fulfills the role that she was presented to fill.
I think the note about the code, actually, and its lack of having a defined nature, which I get makes sense because It's a gigantic, enormous world, and they need not leeway, but I mean from a writer's perspective for the story, they need to be able to add and adapt to this code as and when needed based upon what's happening. The trouble is they don't. We never actually end up in a situation where the code needs to be elaborated upon, and we're left with this vague idea that the code is, if people are bad, kill them. Unless don't.
The code is basically our advice for game designers. If it's a good thing, do it. If it's not, kill people.
Unless the plot demands that we don't. And that's a shame. If you're going to give me the character where they are bound by this very strict code, and we can get into whether or not she really is, but based on purely what the game gives us, because I'm going to say that if your game is actually going to say that she's only taking this role on so that she can find a way to psychologically deal with the task that she has at hand, you're going to need to give me a bit more evidence. Not you, but the game. I'm going to need that more concretely spelled out. It just feels like they had an idea for what this could be, and then never got it further than the headline. Just, she has a code, and we'll leave it there.
And I think that's why Legion's explanation that she has taken the role of a Justicar to deal with her rogue daughters is way more satisfying as a story than what we're actually presented with, is because it kind of paints Samara as this character who adopted this role just so she had the freedom to do what she knew she had to do. She's not doing this because of the code. She accepted the role so that she didn't face consequences for doing what she knew she was going to have to. Because nobody holds a Justicar accountable beyond the code. And so if she just said I was following the code, and everybody else has the same understanding of the code that we do, which is, it exists, then she gets to deal with the things that are important to her however she likes. And that is a way more interesting character than the one that I got.
I think I also like the idea because, yeah, I agree with you. That is much more interesting. And if you give me that, then I think that's a satisfying explanation for why she is the way she is. I might also quite like it if it turns out that the code actually is quite a corrupt idea. That they do make it malleable. They keep it vague deliberately so they can act how and in the way that they want to. And it's almost, and it might function almost as part of a power grab for the Justicars in Asari society. But we don't have any of that. We just have there's a code.
You could replace the term Justicar with Spectre. For some reason, a Spectre is okay, but Justicar we're real critical about. They're doing the same thing. They're just doing it for a different faction.
I think we're pretty critical about Spectres. It's just,
yeah, we were not kind to Spectres in our Mass Effect.
We are playing as a Spectre, so we get to decide our own code.
Right.
Whereas we are presented with Samara as adhering to this strict code that nobody seems to know anything about, but it's very strict. Just trust me, it's the most strict.
But you guys are the CSEC officer in Mass Effect 1 who's like, Spectres, we don't need that. I mean, you get rogue people like Saren. That's a classic example of why we don't need Spectres in our world. And you're like, I think you're giving them giving a bad rap or whatever. You never really contradict him in that conversation, or at least not from the lore perspective. You're not given that option.
I mean, I think objectively he's right.
Yeah.
I think we don't need Spectres. I think the reason that Mass Effect works is because Shepard, after Mass Effect 1, is not really a Spectre anymore. They reinstate his title if you ask for it, but Shepard was going to do what he's going to do regardless of the Council. He's aware of information they don't have. He sees the threat to the universe, and Shepard is a hero. He's not going to just let that go. It doesn't matter if he's a Spectre anymore. He's a hero. And we need heroes. We don't need Spectres.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, you can be both. One thing about Samara is that I always use her in the suicide mission for protecting against when you're on the collector ship, whatever. And her and Jack, if you use Miranda, you'll die.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter what your loyalty is, which I always found a little weird. Miranda just can't hold it for that. She's supposed to be the perfect biotic, and she can't hold it for that. And yet Jack can. I would think Jack would be the one that gets taken because she's more of a burst energy person, and Miranda's more of the static. I think they got that wrong, in my opinion. But
I personally love that decision.
Yeah.
But then again, I hate Miranda.
Yeah.
So.
But I
love
always
Jack.
use Samara. I've always used Samara from the very beginning because I kind of thought she fit that role of what you were saying. She's supposed to be this biotic dynamo. Well, in that situation, she did. She did it. In fact, I would love it if she was the only one that could have done it.
That would make a lot more sense to me. I love that Jack can, but it presents this kind of dichotomy in terms of biotics where Samara is this absurdly powerful, as Cobb said, aged Asari who is progressed to the point where her biotics are even more impressive. And she has that discipline to go with it. Whereas Jack has none of that discipline and matches that feat. I think it just elevates Jack, which I love.
If they were going half that distance, Jack could do it. But that's why I'm saying that entire distance, no. That's Samara. So I'm the only one that's given a letter, I think. I think I gave her a B. So what do y'all got?
I gave her a D.
Okay.
Oh, I'm tied D and E. I'll go D.
I don't have it. I don't have an E.
I'm gonna I'm gonna have an E, just because I'd like to fill up my list.
Just because fuck you, Banana.
That's interesting. I would never put of Samara as a D overall, but I guess that's where we have her. So
Yeah, I'm just uninspired, which is such a shame for what she could have been. I think Samara
that's
might be more
exactly
of a
what it
letdown.
is. Samara is a huge lost potential, and
Yeah.
that's why she's so low.
like I said, there's big lore dumps with her, and I don't think I could flesh out Mass Effect Asari without Samara. And so that's why I maybe like present her a little bit higher than just what her character is. But yeah, I mean, I can't argue strongly against a C or a D. The wheels are somewhat turning. They're not always. Trust me, guys. Just trust me.
Have some goddamn faith, Arthur. Oh wait, shit, that was Arthur's voice. Bollocks.
You know, it was funny when I was playing Red
All
Dead.
Americans sound the same.
And when I was playing Red Dead on Steam on Twitch, I had to almost stop because I kept saying things before he would say it, and I'm like, "Dadgummit."
Dadgummit.
You know,
Dutch.
their wagon would break down, and he says, "Oh," and I said, "Oh hell." And then sure enough, he was like, "Oh hell."
I think I've done that a few times in some of the games I've played on stream. Right? I think one of them was, "What the fuck was that?" And then the next line was, "What the hell just happened?"
I like your vision more.
Yeah.
See, this is where I'm cursed. Like, I can only think of 2 games with people with Welsh accents in. One of them is Elden Ring. There's quite a few in there, and they're like the nice, respectable, like very realistic Welsh accents. They sounded actually from Wales. And the only other one I can think of is a character called Mr. Drippy in Ni no Kuni, who sounds exactly like you'd imagine.
I have that game. I'm gonna play it now.
Yeah. He has, just so you know, like the most Welsh accent imaginable, from a very particular area called the Valleys. When you play, Mr. Drippy is from the Valleys, which weirdly is where I'm from. So keep your fucking keep your mouth in check.
So the next character we're going to go over, somebody who's directly related to the Samara. We probably won't have too much to cover about her, but it's Morinth.
Yeah,
I feel like the first time I played through Mass Effect, I didn't know Morinth was an option. I just knew she could kill you. You'll never guess how I learned that.
And she's not much of an option even when you get her, to be honest, because she's got no real story after that.
Oh yeah.
Samara does. You can continue the conversation. You can even have a romance with Samara. Well, you can have a romance with Morinth. I take that back.
So to speak.
About as long as the romance with Jenkins.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say that there's anything interesting there at all. And in Mass Effect 3, she's not a companion. She's not at the Citadel. She's actually a Banshee. So, and you only know that because it has the Banshee with a name, says Morinth on it.
Which is awful.
Exactly. But at least there's a lore consistent issue that's going on there. She was going to go down that road. And that's exactly what happened. The only reason why it didn't happen already was because she was with us. When you're on the Normandy, she basically assumes the presentation of Samara. So all the crew thinks that she's Samara. So no one's the wiser. It's just you and her that know. I would think Edie would know the difference somehow, some way, genetically speaking.
Like she would, have to.
But again,
and all the sensors on that ship, I feel like something would.
Fingerprint ID, something would have to happen. But anyway, it's never presented. It's kind of just like
genetic advantage towards deception.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying is that there's nothing there. There's literally nothing there. It's empty calories. So she was added just because it kind of is interesting, but it's not even interesting. So they didn't make her interesting. They could have replaced all those storylines from Samara and Morinth and made me want to do that. They had
gotten rid of Jacob.
Yeah, if they got rid of Jacob, had more time. Who knows? Maybe those lines do exist. They just ran out of time. But I guess my point here is that I probably the only E I'll give. That's probably as low as I'm going to go.
I think she's reflective of a series of poor decisions, which is a real shame. Initially, the idea that you can recruit her feels incredibly superfluous, bearing in mind how little work was actually done. I feel we didn't need that choice to make. We might as well have just had Samara demolish Morinth in a cutscene and really show off her power. Instead, we get to make a decision which bizarrely has, and this is a real kiss of death for me in my video games, a decision with what seems like an objectively wrong answer. Just straight up wrong. Because all you're doing by selecting Morinth is depriving yourself of a fully fledged character in lieu of having the skeleton, at best, of a character. So we have that. We have nothing that makes Morinth stand out as unique, which is a real shame. Even as you say, on board, she's going to take on the personage, the mannerisms of Samara. So essentially we're having Samara without having Samara. Empty calories is the perfect way to describe it. And then finally, the cherry on the dog turd, Morinth coming up as the name for a Banshee at the end of Mass Effect 3. Which I agree with you, it makes perfect sense. That's how his story needs to end, but we don't get to see any of it happen. She's just gone for the entire game, and then all of a sudden there's a Banshee that for some reason we know is Morinth. Despite not really having any physical indicator that's the case. It's not a unique model. It's just a Banshee. And I think that's a real shame. She just simply goes... She acts as a living reminder of laziness and a tendency to not think things through.
I feel like the Banshee with just the name Morinth is the perfect ending to her arc, given that in Mass Effect 2 she was just Samara with the name Morinth. It's full circle there. I will say, for me, Morinth represents everything that is interesting about Samara, which is very little. And then you don't get to learn more about Morinth. Morinth is what made Samara interesting for me, and you don't get to learn anything about her. So I can't really elevate her above the position of Samara. I feel like I have to put her a tier lower, which means I now have an E tier, and she is it.
Well, I mean, her... I think, like I said, there's opportunity. You know, if you recruit her, here's what I'm thinking, is that with the Asari and their ability to manipulate, and that's exactly what Arda Yakshi are, she feeds on that destruction. But we're playing into an uncontrollable character trait. Like, there's no way she can come out of this. Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe just nobody's really made enough of an effort to deal with an Arda Yakshi because Shepard was able to not fall for it. when she was trying to put her under the spell. So what if we did put in the effort? And this is a whole different, because none of this is in game. What if we did put in the effort? What if Morinth could come to, maybe I don't need to do this. Maybe I need to make an atonement or something. And she tries. It's like any person with a habit. You got to get them out of that. And it's work, it's effort. And none of that's being done, obviously, in the writing. But what if we can get to that point? What if we have a teetering balance? And then in Mass Effect 3, maybe early on, we have a mission where she's being surrounded by the Reaper groups, and because we know that the different races create different ones. But what if she's being surrounded and we have like maybe a time mission? We have to find her within the 5 minutes or something like that. We have to take out a harvester in the process. Make it work where we save her and we give her more options. And she decides to go to the Citadel and get help or whatever. And then she becomes part of the Citadel DLC. Or, we say the wrong thing and she says, fine, I'm just going to do what I want to do. If we don't have those points, be able to say that. So then we see her as a banshee. But give me that connective tissue so that way I have a reason to even want to discover her.
I'm okay with the game showing you made the wrong decision. That you should have really saved Samara. I'm okay with the idea that the Ardayakshi, there is no way to get around this, that she is irredeemable. But you need some dialogue. You need some story. You need to let me try this mission and then fail and make me realize that in Mass Effect 2, I messed up. I should have saved that person. So you could even go that way. You could have, which is clearly what the designers want, you could have us realize that it's the wrong decision. But it doesn't mean you have to make us realize and make it boring.
Yeah, you don't have to punish us for making the wrong decision in a game about making decisions.
Yeah. So you can absolutely go that way with Legion, where you allow yourself possibly that idea of redemption, that much like the Krogan aren't what we always thought they were. Maybe there's something with the Ardat Yakshi, that maybe there is something we can do. Or you can go the other way. I'm afraid it falls into our old advice. You can do a whole lot of things, but you just have to not do it badly.
Mm-hmm.
And Morinth, for me, it really falls into it's done badly.
And in this case, it was not doing anything.
Yeah, they did nothing and they did it badly.
Yeah. I think to tie back to something that Com said when presented with the choice between Samara and Morinth, it really feels disappointing because it's presented as this big decision and it's really not a decision. You either get Samara, who you can talk to afterwards, you can even romance, or you get Morinth disguised as Samara, which is just Samara without conversations.
Yeah.
It's not really a decision. And
just think of
the illusion of a decision is infuriating for me.
Yes.
If you are going to present me with a choice and then tell me it didn't matter, don't present me with the choice. Just move on. Because
the game gives us in advance that we should pick Samara. It's not that when we get there, we have no information. It's a 50-50 flip a coin. And you can see this by if you go and look at the numbers of how many people picked Samara and not Morinth. And it's overwhelming majority because the game leads you down that path. You could even, if you really wanted, I wouldn't like this that much, but it's an alternative. You could choose to help Morinth. Samara, because she's this Justicar, doesn't give a crap. She will overwhelm you and overwhelm Morinth, get rid of Morinth anyway. And now you have to realize that actually now she's not going to be on your side. She's not going to come and join you because you tried to fight against her. There's all sorts of ways you could deal with it.
Yeah, Morinth is pleading a logical case. She's saying, I was born this way. I can't control who I am. I mean, maybe she can, maybe she can't. But per the Asari, she can't.
Yeah.
And so you really are, condemning her to death because of just the fact that she was born. It really seems wrong fundamentally, but if they're right, then you can't really argue. I mean, she's going to continue to kill people. Like I said, I have her as an E. I really wish there was something there, but there's nothing.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, given that my explanation of Samara was so much wasted potential, Morinth is that to an even greater degree.
Yeah.
This is a character you introduced who was inherently interesting as an R.Yakshi, and you did nothing with it. And as much as we've said that there's that possibility that there's nothing she can do about this, I believe she has 2 sisters who have gone into isolation as their means of confronting this condition, and that is never presented as an option. So when she says, I can't control this, we have 2 counterexamples. You can handle this in a way that is not destructive. And I feel like if there was the possibility of convincing Morinth to try alternatives, to try to find a solution, and maybe the conclusion is that the Asari were right the whole time. There's no redemption available to R.Yakshi. I feel like that is at least more interesting than what we got, which is you're kind of only presented with that conclusion because a banshee's named Morinth.
I think I was just running over the idea in my head that I really think it's a shame if you did go with Morinth. It might have been fun to put her in that monastery scenario in Mass Effect 3. See what she does there. Does she go back and maybe show her sisters that, no, we should go and live our lives, going back and try and corrupt them? Maybe they've already turned, maybe they haven't. Maybe you get to fight against all 3 now. Maybe you just fight against Morinth and the sisters help each other. There's all sorts of things you could have done. And I'm not saying every idea is good, but it's better than the 0 ideas they used.
And really, how lame is that? I mean, does Morinth have like a name tag? How do we know that particular banshee is Morinth?
That bothers me. It's not even a unique model.
Yeah. So,
I feel like that is a testament to the laziness that Morinth represents.
Yeah, at least like Marauder shields, we know who that was. They meant something.
The scene, it's not in the legendary, but in the original Mass Effect 2 on disc, or however, you could actually bug out that conversation that you have with Samara and Morinth and go for Infinite Paragon, Infinite Renegade in that scene. You could kind of loop it basically if you did it right. You can't do that anymore. What do I know? I only have like 10 hours of Mass Effect 2. So, but that was that I always actually would try to go to Samara first because you could like do that. So that way you'd have all conversation options for the rest of the game. If it was dealt with a Paragon or Renegade decision.
I feel like that is, that's almost the best way to replay Mass Effect is with those little exploits that give you max Paragon, max Renegade, so you can explore all of those options. I feel like that almost should have been a feature of like New Game Plus.
Yeah, for me, like Jacob, weirdly, that's harsh. Jacob is lower than Morinth, but no, for Jacob, for me, is tied with Morinth. Sorry, but so some of these characters are uniquely bad, uniquely uninteresting.
You're probably right. It probably is an F. If Jacob is an F, Morinth has to be an F.
I feel like Jacob is an F because they made effort and failed, and Morinth is an E
different kind
because
of
they failed for not making any effort.
Yeah. The nuance that we have, look at us. This is real analysis.
If I'm going to say F and you're saying F, I think it still defaults to F then.
I feel like even if Cobb miraculously gave her an S, we have to give her an F.
We have to be true to form. Oh, okay. Comm said
an
S?
Ignoring Cobb's opinion. True to form.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Game.
I was so hopeful he hit record before you did that.
It's possible.
The blooper reel. When we do the episode where we talk about Mass Effect 3 companions, and it's like 8 minutes, and then 52 minutes of just Cobb doing that.
Or just all the comments about Jacob Just calm, it's just chewing. That's all he's doing.
All the comments about the character whose name we couldn't fucking get right.
Kitsune.
Here around these parts, we call orcas Kasumi. Around here.
Oh, I wish there was a Texan in Mass Effect 2.
Well, that's what the modding community is for, boy.
Just have Legion record a bunch of voice lines.
What the hell is that? Looks like a Hanar. Now that we've gone over a plethora of companions, we get to go over a few more. So this companion is really interesting because when you discover this companion, it's almost in the same projection that we have for Samara, where it's this overpowered biotic being that we're not going to be able to contain, but we do. But I don't think it's treated the same way as it is with Samara. So specifically, I'm talking about Jack. Jack is an overpowered being, and you see the powers that kind of associate with it. So especially with the wave, the biotic wave, you can make it a little bit wider when you increase her talent pool. But you combine that with something like warp from anywhere else, like on her own character, if she puts it out there, or if like someone like your own character, if they put out warp, I mean, you're looking at a biotic explosion. And because it's this wave, it's a big boom. So it really does a lot, especially early on. I mean, she's really useful early on and never really stops becoming useful. So her arc is pretty human. She definitely has a struggle of not even knowing who she really is. She's been she's been raised to be isolated, so she doesn't really know what a comfortable personality really should be. And so you get this impression over and over that she isn't looking for danger. She just is the danger. But I don't know. I think overall it's really hard to classify her, because depending on your point of view of her struggles and how you help her or associate the story with her involvement with you, I mean, I could very easily call her an A, and I could very easily call her a D, depending on that perspective. I don't think that there's anything that intrinsically pulls me one way or the other. But I guess if I have to default to the gameplay and how useful she is, I don't see anything wrong with giving her a solid B. Her story doesn't continue like it should, in my opinion, in 3, but I do like her progression as an individual. So I'm really leaning toward A, but for right now, I'm going to be safe and call her a B.
Yeah, I think highlighting that she's kind of presented in the same way Samara is almost sets you up for the same disappointment that we got with Samara. But the reality is that Jack is a tremendously powerful biotic, especially by human standards. And I think a lot of the kind of terror that surrounds Jack is based on what she's willing to do. Whereas in the case of Samara, it's a lot of the code, but it's awe of her power. With Jack, it's terror of her unpredictability and her power. And I feel like, unlike Samara, Jack really delivers. Jack is powerful in combat, and she's unique in combat. And I feel like that is kind of the opposite reaction that I had with Samara, is you've hyped this character up, I have high expectations, and you delivered. So I'm a huge fan of Jack. I feel like just in terms of the setup that they've done with that character and delivering in both gameplay and lore, Jack is solid for me.
Yeah, Jack is one of my not very favorite, but she's in my upper echelons. I'm a pretty big fan. I don't use her as much in gameplay as I might like to, but I think I found that when enemies are shielded, she has quite a bit of trouble really contributing. So on the higher difficulties, which I would tend to play now, I don't go all the way up, but I do like the game to be quite difficult. Found that she struggled. and doesn't really get a chance to pull her weight. I love almost everything about her dialogue, the character, who she is, and I love the strange, it's probably the same kind of thing I like about Zaid. The sense of that cockiness and confidence that's out on the surface at first, and occasionally personifies itself in very, very grandiose ways. Like, what is it, like the "I'm the bad bitch" or whatever she shouts, like all-powerful bitch, I think it is. It's a ridiculous line. And then you see how frail she actually is. Whereas Zaid always kind of keeps that veneer. I think he's got enough years of suffering and torment that he's able to bury it down in a very unhealthy way, but he keeps it down. Whereas Jack is a bit more volatile. So you've got this massively powerful, sometimes hugely confident individual who is cracked deeply beneath the surface. And it shows through so often, so clearly, and through her interactions with others. I like that she interacts with others. Her scene with Miranda, for example, to actually get a genuine interaction between two characters, I think is so enriching and really adds to their personalities. So for myself, Jack, she's right near in the upper echelons. Not my top 1 or 2 characters, but certainly my top 3, 4, or 5.
In Mass Effect 2 specifically, right?
Across both 2 and 3.
Oh, okay.
I think the overwhelming majority of my opinion of Jack is formed in Mass Effect 2. I do feel a bit let down with the way she continues her story in Mass Effect 3, but I think based on my experience with Mass Effect 2, I love that character. And as Com says, there's this brokenness beneath the surface with Jack in the same way that there is with Zaid. And I feel like it's almost representative of this idea that despite it all, Jack still has a little bit of hope that she's willing to let you see that brokenness because she's so desperate to find a personal connection with someone that she'll open up to you. And that immediately was endearing to me for somebody who has so many reasons not to trust other people, who has so many bad experiences, who is so damaged by the horrible things people have done to her, that she's still open to the idea that maybe you're not like them. That is a level of personal strength that I don't think you see in too many other characters, mostly because those other characters aren't as tragic. They don't have the same level of damage before you even meet them.
Yeah, I think Jack stands out almost uniquely amongst almost everyone, and you can see that in the way that the romance arc goes, that she's willing almost to be used sexually. But the immediate change afterwards, it's not, I don't think she's testing you, I don't think it's as cynical as that. But if you are willing to sort of just use her body and throw her to the side, you have crossed a line completely with her that you will never get back. And that, her willingness to just shut you out for failing her, again, not in a testing way, I don't think it's that cynical or that sinister, but you really do let her down because she's hoping for better, is so not well done isn't even the word, that's not what I'm looking for. It's pretty human.
It's very real.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of a sensitive and delicate way to say it. Yeah, it's very human, it's very real. And her then shutting you off, the game punishing you for being a prick, good. And I think it's a brave decision almost by the designers to do that.
I think that is that moment where it feels like Jack is testing you is kind of a representative of reality in those situations. Those moments where somebody is broken and we see that they almost behave in a way that contributes to them staying broken because they put you into this test. They need to know where you stand. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to know where you stand with somebody, but they have been in this unhealthy relationship with everyone they've ever met, so they don't know the right way to go about it, and so they test you. And when you let them down, you can't come back from that. And that is so very real. Because people who are damaged, people who can't trust as easily anymore, need to figure out where their line is and where you stand on terms of being on their side, being a genuine friend, or being another person who's trying to use them. And Jack is that person. She needs to know, and if you let her down, she's not going to change her mind. She knows. She does not have it in her to give you a second chance, because no one has ever earned a second chance.
Well, her romance arc, I don't really like. I think they really failed that too, because even if you do a proper romance with her, it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, Mass Effect 3, she's not a romance option anymore. And I also don't understand why they didn't apply the Liara rule where you can romance her as male or female, because she actually has a story where she teamed up with a group of thieves, and it was a couple who were both male and female. It was a married couple, and she has a relationship with both of them. So we clearly know it's not a preference necessarily. I mean, so why you can't romance her as Femme Shepherd, I really don't. Never understood that. I think they failed that. So
that one never clicked.
Mm-mm.
But I will say the fact that you can't romance her in 3, for me, didn't feel problematic, given that it's very possible that you are Jack's first real romance. You're the first person who actually cared about her and wasn't just using her, wasn't treating her like a sexual object. And I mean, for most of us, that first one, that's not the only one. It's not going to work out. And Jack is still very much recovering from all the damage that she's endured. She's still figuring out who she is. It only makes sense that she's not going to be the same person in 3, and that relationship isn't going to be the same.
Well, in 3, her personality is different. She's taking care of those kids, and that's her priority now. So it's not an option to be a romance, because she has other priorities that are just going to get in the way of being able to be with you.
Yeah, I liked it that she was off the table as a romance. It was very much this idea that I think she needed, not necessarily Shepard, but someone. Just needed someone to show her that this was possible. It wasn't just a world of, the life that she was stuck living prior to that, how violent, how vicious that was, that wasn't the way it had to be. And even though Shepard wasn't supposed to be the one, I think it's as simple as that. Shepard wasn't supposed to be the right person for her. He was the right person at that moment in time to help her become who she could then go on to be. But they weren't ever supposed to be the couple. And honestly, I think for someone coming out of the position that she'd been in, it probably wouldn't have been healthy if they had stuck together for too long. I'd imagine there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So it's one of those moments which for me just kind of made sense the way it was. It's not as satisfying from a gameplay, look, I won kind of way, but trying to think of it as a person, I think it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's exactly it. Like, yeah, I kind of wanted that fantasy of things having a happy ending for Jack, but the realism needed to be there. The fact that you are likely the first person who has even tried to convince Jack of their own worth it's problematic if you become the only person she stays with.
Yeah.
It kind of nurtures a dependence that you don't want to encourage.
Okay, so you have a letter for me, or?
I think we're just going to
talk. It's a hard
more
thing to
about
go to
romance.
a letter of that. Yeah.
I did say that I could see someone arguing strongly for A and strongly for D or something.
I almost don't feel right putting up a letter after that conversation. It almost feels.
Yeah, I feel like we have taken a very serious conversation about very real world issues, and now we're going to grade a human being.
Yeah. Can we jump into a gameplay or something for a minute?
Come out. We know you're here. Who are you?
My name is Aresh, and you're breaking into my home. I know you, Subject Zero. So many years have passed, and I thought I was the only survivor.
My name is Jack. How the hell do you know me?
We all knew your face, Jack. They inflicted horrors on us so their experiments wouldn't kill you. You were the question, and I'm still looking for the answer.
Looks like you're not the only one pulled back here, Jack.
I tried to forget this, but a place like this, it doesn't forget you. It follows you. I hired these mercs and came back almost a solar year ago. We're rebuilding it piece by piece. I'm gonna find out what they knew, how to unlock true biotic potential in humans. I'm restarting the Telton facility. It will be beautiful.
I wanted a hole in the ground. He's trying to justify what happened by using it? You do the same thing to new kids. Wasn't this forced on you?
Some were bought from poor families on Earth or kidnapped from colonies. Most ended up here the way I did. Batarian pirates. They did such horrible things to us. They must have had good reasons.
There's no reason good enough. Are you nuts? You lived it. This place was like a prison. How'd you get out?
We all attacked at once as they were taking us to the lab. They would have put us down. But then Jack got loose. When I came to, it was over. The guards, the scientists, and the kids were all dead. And you were gone.
I stopped it. All of it. Maybe the others did have it bad, but what you're doing is just messed.
Everything we went through must have been worth something.
We can blow up the place, but that still leaves him. What do we do with another you? That's easy.
Just leave me here. This is where I belong.
Fuck that. Jack, he's trapped in his past. You need to move on from yours. He wants to restart this place. He needs to die. He's crazy and he's never gonna restart this facility. You have to let it go. Your past doesn't have to control you. Fuck! Get out of here. Go! He's not worth chasing. None of it is. You did the right thing, Jack. Maybe.
And I do love that the new thing she found was essentially offering herself to this group of kids in a way that had never been offered to her. She'd never had that chance to have that loving, nurturing relationship from whether it be a parental figure, a teacher figure, some sort of authority figure. And she is now using her life and her experiences to provide to all of these kids that. And I think that's an amazing way for her to be. And it's a bit clumsy in the way it's done, and we suddenly end up there and she feels a bit different. But as a principal, I'm really glad that she got to find those kids, that she got to find that academy and become who she became.
I think even the fact that it's a little bit awkward is very real, because not a lot of time has passed. Jack is still very much a young woman. And in that moment, she is struggling to navigate new territory. And it's very understandable that she doesn't know exactly what to say. She doesn't know how to make things feel comfortable again, because awkwardness is kind of an inevitability. And I feel like that kind of ending to her story, or that direction for her story, is very satisfying for the exact reason that Com said, to say this is a person who never really had a nurturing figure in their life. And they are so resilient that they can be a nurturing figure in someone else's life. That is the happy ending that Jack deserved.
When asked what role should the kids play in the war, the previous Jack would have just said, put them on the front line. They're capable of doing it. I mean, they can handle it. Trust me, they can handle it. But this version of Jack that you know will definitely admit, say, no, they're better off in a support role. And that's what that's an option that you can give to them when you start doing the final attack. And it feels a little bit more satisfying because you think you're truly making the right decision, because Jack is objectively looking at it and giving you advice. And I think you can trust that advice.
I
think even
I'm
if
not
you
sure.
take away the objective part, I think Jack is just being protective of her kids. And I love that. Because it's what she didn't get. So even if she's not being objective and it's just, I want to keep them safe, it's a beautiful way for her character to be.
Absolutely. I still don't know that I accept that the original Jack would try to put them on the front lines. Because I think a lot of what we see of Jack is this overconfidence, this cockiness that stems from her tremendous ability. And a lot of that ability, just by the nature of biotics, is tied to her pain. I have to imagine that she knows what she's capable of, and she can cover up the gaps with bluster. She knows that not everybody else can do that. So I think she might not care about those kids, but she's not going to lie to you and say they're ready.
I don't know. I think she might lie because I don't think she does care. She's like, man, that's fine. We can handle it. Because she's not vested. You know?
I feel like
I don't think she's a nihilist.
I feel like at that point, if you're asking her opinion, she's not going to try and get the kids hurt. She has a lot of rage. She has a lot of pain. She blames people for that. Not those kids. I feel like even at her most broken, she is going to see a part of herself in those kids to say, I can't put them in a position where they have to go through what I did just to survive.
She also
So I'm not going to be gentle about it. I'm going to say they suck as biotics.
Yeah.
But if it keeps them off the front lines, it keeps them off the front lines.
Well, even where she was raised in that cell, she blamed the kids for her suffering. She didn't know it was a two.
As a kid, yeah.
And it wasn't until you do her loyalty mission that you start, peeling away the layers of her memory that maybe that's not the way she thought. But that's why I said at the beginning when you first meet Jack, she is separated consciously from other people. So that's why I say I don't think she'd have an opinion that was strongly like, I got to protect these kids. I don't think she cares.
I'm still not sure. Like, I don't think she ever became a true nihilist. I don't think she became genuinely sociopathic. I think she just has a nothing really going except a sense of self-preservation at that time, just desperately trying to hold on. And there's going to be a lot of rage going out, most likely at authority figures, anyone who's going to be exacerbating any sense of control over her life. And I think I'm with Banana. She'd probably try and keep them safe, would probably be pretty brutal about it. Probably wouldn't even necessarily be trying to keep them safe, but wouldn't want to put them in danger.
But if you do...
But it's something that I don't think we'll find a satisfying answer for.
If you do the mission and say, no, we're going to send them to the front lines, she doesn't really fight you.
No, there's trust in you and your decision making.
Sure.
That's really it. We're just looking at simply her morality more than anything else.
So
she's always going to defer to you, as they all do.
Well, because of that deferring quality, you'll have a letter for me?
Yeah, I think it's a good B for me, for Jack.
Yeah.
I think I'd put her in an A.
Okay. So 2 B's and an A.
You had a B, Legion?
Yeah. This next one is one that we will have a lot of contention with. We're not going to agree. I will be right.
Yeah, you'll be right out of here. Come on, Banana. Start our own podcast.
I know exactly who we're talking about, and I want to hear Legion's answer first.
Well...
And then I will disagree.
Yeah. There is only one character, because you have characters like Jacob and Caden who are jack of all trades, master of none. There is only one character in this entire group that is a master of all these things. Every one of them. From an intelligence standpoint, a spiritual standpoint, a physical standpoint, and there's a certain little extra that as you uncover things, they become more and more interesting. And that's going to be Thane. So Thane, where I think BioWare failed Thane is that his Mass Effect 3 arc doesn't really have a true arc, but at least they included him for a really, really important portion of Mass Effect 3. I do think that he should have been on the Normandy for most of the time, if not all the time, in Mass Effect 3. Maybe you do find him at the hospital, but he's better off with you. He just is. And I get all the reasons for it, but that they didn't need to go down that road. Just put him on the Normandy. He'll be fine there. And we'll be able to like flesh out his story a little bit more. Plus, we're missing enough companions that we could, make that story work. But even when he comes into the Normandy for the first time, remember, Mordin questions everything, and it's his nature, and it's fine. Oh, I got to ask, is this an AI? Thane, an AI. It's immediate. He knows what's going on. He is so quick with his mind, and he's got the perfect memory. And that would drive people insane to have a perfect memory, because, yeah, you can remember the good things all the time, but you also remember all the bad things and how that felt all the time.
I already have that part.
But it's the perfect memory, so you also have those exact emotions at every time, all the time. He controls all those things. And so for me, he's an S tier. He's an S tier every single day. I think he's definitely the best romance for Fem Shep. Well, I'll give more explanation on that later, but I just wanted to kind of like present that, and that's where I stand on Thane. I think he is definitely an underrated character, and those who have actually developed a little bit more grow into understanding where that comes from. Not saying that you guys obviously haven't, but I do think that there is a lot more than initially a lot of people give him credit for.
If you don't mind my saying, you don't really seem like an assassin.
You've spent too much time fighting thugs who think custom-painted armor makes them professionals. The Hanar trained my body for this role since I was 6 years old.
You've been killing since you were 6?
Of course not. I didn't make my first kill until I was 12. They were training me. I was not to be used and thrown away. I was an investment.
You were a child, not an investment.
I've given you the wrong idea. They valued me, yes, as a resource, but also as a person. They regretted their need for me.
The Hanar? Excessively polite, worship the Protheans? They don't seem the type who train assassins.
Every species trains assassins. The Hanar are only unusual in that they need other species to do the killing for them. They have a strong grip and natural toxins, but have you ever seen one move quickly outside of water? Or fire a gun?
Why did your parents agree to this?
The agreement was made under the Compact. It was an honor for our family.
The Compact?
We live on the Hanar homeworld because they rescued us, some of us, from extinction. We owe them our lives. That is the Compact.
What exactly are the terms of the Compact?
There are many things the Hanar can't do, even with mechanical aid. They ask Drell to assist them.
This can't be legal. They made your whole race into slaves.
Don't insult me, Shepard. Anyone can refuse to serve. Few do. We owe our existence to the Hanar. We are proud to repay the debt.
Why was your race going extinct?
Overpopulation. That must sound trite to you. Humans developed mass effect drive before the problem became acute. Our homeworld, Rakana, had few resources. We hadn't even developed fusion power when the soil began to fail from overuse and pollution. The Hanar found us a century ago. They sent hundreds of ships, evacuated thousands of us. Billions more had to be left behind.
What's the state of Rakana now?
Do you read your philosophers? A man named Thomas Hobbes. When all the world is overcharged with inhabitants, and the last remedy of all is war, which provideth for every man by victory or death. As Rakana died around them, my people slaughtered each other for mouthfuls of water, crumbs of food.
You started speaking about a past event as if you were watching it.
Drell have perfect memories. We can relive any moment in our lives with perfect clarity. It's difficult to control at times. Some of us disappear into, let's call it solipsism.
What do you mean, solipsism?
When a memory feels as real as life, it's as valid as life. Thinking about a moment brings back the smell of cut grass, the warmth of another's hand on yours, the taste of another's tongue in your mouth. Wouldn't you rather lose yourself in such a memory than spend the night alone, staring at walls of metal and plastic?
Isn't there a risk that you could lose yourself in bad memories as well?
Of course. Remembering the times I've taken bullets is unpleasant. But I can look at my knee and see it's not shattered. The memories that are hard to escape are those of despair.
You can remember everything that happened in your life?
Nearly. I expect if we remembered the birth trauma, we'd never recover from it.
You can relive every assassination you've ever made?
In perfect detail. Every mistake I made. Every target's last breath.
That sounds difficult. At any moment, you could relive the guilt.
Guilt? No. I've never felt any particular guilt about my contracts. My employers killed them. My body was only the tool they used. If you kill a man with your gun, do you hold the gun responsible?
My gun can't decide right from wrong. You clearly do.
My soul does. But my body is merely flesh. Flesh whose reflexes were honed to kill. Drell minds are different from humans. We see our body as a vessel, and accept that it is not always under our control.
That's a strange way of looking at yourself.
Humans often believe in a soul distinct from the body. A spirit responsible for moral reasoning that lives on after the body's death. Our belief is just a bit more literal.
The last time we talked, you remembered one of your assassinations. Something about sunset-colored eyes?
That time. Laser dot trembles on the skull. Spice on the spring wind. Sunset eyes, defiant in the scope. A bystander noticed my spotting laser and threw herself between me and the target. She couldn't see me, but she stared me down.
It was odd that you just blurted that out. Just another vivid Drell memory?
No. She was a vivid person.
Did you take the shot?
Not that day.
I should get back to my duties.
Shepard, I appreciate these chats we have.
You've spent a lot of your life alone, Thane.
Work fulfilled me. Reading. I barely spoke to anyone outside my family. It seems there will be no one to mourn me when I die. You're the only friend I've made in 10 years.
I'm not a fan of Thane. I think Thane is fine. I've never understood the sort of the fascination with Thane. I've never got it whatsoever. The perfect memory thing, I think, is horrible. If I knew someone with a perfect memory, except for their previous shames, Banana, of course, I would hate that person because you don't know what that person's lying to you about. Someone tells you they've got a perfect memory, it's photographic, they can not get anything wrong, they can lie to you easier than anyone possibly could. That's distinctly unpleasant, and you'd have no recourse to push back against it because their memory's perfect. It's vile and deeply unpleasant. I hate his justification for his assassin work. It's got real just following orders vibes. His entire thing, deeply unpleasant, takes some fucking responsibility. And as he's coming closer to his death, he is beginning to take responsibility. Slowly. Whilst also justifying, what is it, a gun doesn't kill someone? Does he pull that line out? I think he actually does. Or the trigger doesn't kill. So yeah, of course. The person carrying it does. You. His contrition is weak at best. And the worst thing for me, and this is weirdly enough the same thing that I hold my friends' standards to in real life. He is the most boring thing I've ever spoken to in my life. The greatest crime for me in a person is, are you boring? And I think Thane absolutely falls into that trap. I actually quite like the way he plays, though.
I agree with you on some points. I hate that justification for his assassin work. I feel like that is so incredibly lazy, and I feel like Thane is way too smart to ever genuinely believe that. But it does represent that kind of almost indoctrination of a culture.
Mm-hmm.
When you are brought up in an environment where people tell you this is the way things are, and that's all you ever hear, it is almost impossible to break free from that thinking. And it's not until Thane meets Shepard that he starts to break away. He sees himself as a tool for these assassination contracts his entire life. And then he meets Shepard. Shepard treats him like a person. And then he sees himself as a person. And he starts to take accountability for his previous decisions. And that is an impressive growth given how deep that indoctrination has to be for you to excuse murder. I mean, for Thane to believe that he genuinely can't do anything wrong as long as somebody pays him to do it. That's deep indoctrination.
Well, so he's raised by the Hanar. Of course, the Hanar don't enslave any of these Drell. They simply assisted them because their own home planet was dying. And so the Drell feel incredibly grateful. So Thane himself had a predilection for being an assassin, that he was just good at those type of things. So they never groomed him to that. It was never something they said, you're going to do this. It's just something he was good at. And so he played toward his strengths. And the only way that he could thank the Hanar in his way is to perform services for them. But he does have a mind about it. He can choose to not do certain things. But you look at like Dantius, when you first meet him, what is she doing? And she's got all these workers that she's working to death, have literally shoved them off the building, and basically have said, you know, any of the mechs that they have, the Eclipse mercenaries, all of them are just basically going to shoot on sight any workers if they haven't evacuated the building. So she needs to go. And that's his contract, is to get rid of her. And he does it. And so it's not that he has a blind contract. He's doing things for the justification of a better world in the eyes of the people who sent him, of course. But again, Shep's not doing that much different. It's just not in the same name of assassination.
That's true, but Shep is also not framing that as a decision made beyond him. We're all acknowledging that Thane can choose which contracts he accepts, but then absolves himself of responsibility for those contracts.
And I think that's
Shepard
where my
is
problem
making those decisions himself or herself and owning up to them. These are my decisions.
And I think that's where, honestly, the problem lies for me with Thane is the exact thing that we mentioned already is he's too intelligent for that. He's just too intelligent. I could imagine, like, he's a Drell, right? Is that the species name?
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine, speaking crassly, the stupidest Drell just falling into the I'm just a weapon thing. Not him. There's too much going on upstairs. And no, I just find it so weak of him as a character to be as he is, especially in the face of his own mortality. That time when it really is coming to wrap things up and admit who you were. And the fact that he gets close and keeps just pushing away from it drives me mad.
The way he reprimands you for the clumsy approach to Dantius in that opening mission where you meet him, it feels like he's taking a moral high road and then ignoring his own moral failings, which is infuriating. For him to say, you were clumsy, you killed people who didn't need to die, and then still frame himself as a weapon to say, I take these contracts and I kill because these people need to die, not because I've decided they need to die. That's horseshit. You chose to take the contract. You based your decision on whether or not they need to die on the information you had available to you, and then you blamed somebody else for saying they need to die. That's lazy.
It's absolving oneself of responsibility, which he's in no position to do.
Well, like, he's the only person he's actually asking for is not anybody else besides his own beliefs. And he's said before that a lot of the Drell don't fall under those beliefs anymore. It's old world thinking. So he's may not be praying to anybody.
Even more reason for him to recognize how ludicrous it is. Meanwhile, Shepard's actively looking for him. Shepard's asking around, has anybody seen an assassin? I have to ask about an assassin because he's still an assassin.
Also, Shepard's wandering around the Citadel all day anyway. Mm-hmm. He's popping in and out of his favorite stores. Just hang around a beer for a while. We'll swing by. No, there's other ways. I'm not a fan of Thane. I find him just so off-putting. The only other thing, I'm going to give him a surprisingly good grade at the end of this, by the way. the only other thing that gets me with Thane as well is the Heart of Gold Assassin thing. Just as a character basis, just makes me want to vomit. It's never liked it very, very much.
Well, I don't think he's ever portrayed himself like that, though.
I think he'd like to be held as one. I think he'd like to be. And we see him.
I feel like that is very much the conclusion of the way we've talked about how he presents the contracts he accepts. Is I choose the contracts that align with my sense of justice, and I want people to agree with my sense of justice. I want to be recognized as an assassin who takes contracts that are just, and that is just nonsense.
And if you don't, I'll kill your families.
He constantly refers to him as not a good person. He's always referred to himself as an evil person.
I mean, I thought this as a narrative idea, because especially as we go on, it's all about, but his son. We have to have him thinking about his son, him falling apart on the hospital bed, and is supposed to feel sympathy for him. He kind of deserves to die. As far as that idea goes, someone deserving death, he's about as high up the ranks as anyone would be.
This is not the connection I was going to draw at the beginning of this conversation, but if you're familiar with the character of BoJack Horseman, there is a moment where someone confronts him about everything that's wrong with his life and points out that you can't just say you're taking accountability. You can't just say, I'm an evil person, I did something wrong, and then keep being that person. It's not good enough for you to recognize that you did something wrong if you're gonna keep doing that same thing. You're not better just because you know you're doing something wrong. You're worse. And Thane is that guy.
It's amazing how often that show hit the nail on the head, by the way. It is astounding. Not to go further into it, but just for anyone who doesn't know it, thorough recommendation.
Yeah, we've never criticized Thane's abilities.
Yeah.
Thane is a very capable combatant.
Yeah. I would love
shitty person though.
Yeah, that's it. He's one like Samara. I would weirdly have liked some more cool cutscenes of him being this awful person, like being an assassin like that. I'd have loved to have seen that. And I think, oddly enough, if you're going to have a game without a moral compass, a little Adventures of Thane game that was sort of 6 to 8 hours long, something like that, I'd love to play. Him doing all his assassinations in creative ways. Oh, I feel like he might be exciting as a character. There's a lot of things that I think that, that's fun. Just speaking on a purely personal level about him, I think he's revolting.
Yeah, I think since we've brought it up multiple times at this point, I think Thane believes he's lawful good, but he's actually lawful evil.
Good.
And I think that is probably the best way to sum up his personality in terms of the way he justifies his behavior. Is he thinks I'm doing necessary deeds. I won't even evaluate the morality of the deed itself. I am evaluating whether or not it is necessary. And because it's necessary, I think I'm a good person. And that's not how that works.
I don't know. I think he sees himself as a true neutral. He doesn't see himself as good. Never has.
Oh no, I think he portrays himself as a true neutral. He personally believes he's lawful good. He is in fact lawful evil. He wants you to believe that he is blameless. He wants you to believe that he's ambivalent. He wants you to believe that he is a tool being used by someone else. He knows he's not. You know he's not. He's committed to that lie.
I really like that. I really do. I think it's such an interesting way to think about it.
I don't really agree that he is that matter of fact. He is not. He's trying to displace the blame. I don't think he's ever ran away from the blame. Ever.
I think he has, in the sense that he just acknowledges that what he's doing is evil.
Mm-hmm.
But he keeps doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why he calls himself evil.
It's the praying for...
Yeah. But
yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah. You can pray and be evil.
Doing evil things.
I think he acknowledges he's a bad person. Whether praying helps or not, it's not the point.
I'm not sure we're speaking the same language.
I think
we
even
might
the
have crossed
fact that
wires
he is
slightly.
calling himself evil is performative to convince you he's not. Because if he genuinely believed what he was doing was evil, he'd stop doing it.
But he did.
Yeah.
He did stop doing it.
He did
took him a long
when he
time.
found out he was dying.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, he doesn't get
that's
it.
not the same choice.
But he found out we already knew he was dying, and he took on this last contract as basically a suicide contract. But when he did not die, he still could have been doing what he did before up until his death. Chose not to anymore.
Look, I'm not going to say that there's no absolution available for him, but he's going to have to work a lot harder than that to get it.
I feel like a lifetime of that
Yeah.
presented at the end when he is changing his mind does not absolve him of his past.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really that for me. It's in the great scales sort of life. I think his moral compass or his moral scale weighs much more heavily towards the bad that he's done, and he needed a few more years if he had any hope of undoing all of that, or even getting even close to equalizing that out. And he might have died whilst engaging in good actions, if you will. He didn't die a good man.
Yeah, I guess I can relate more to Thane because I'm not looking for absolution myself on anything. I could care less. I can pray. Why not? Maybe I can find that little outlet or something that makes me feel better, but I'm not going to try to convince anybody else of who I am or who I'm not. I think that's Thane. So I don't really think it's performative. I do think that he thinks of himself as bad and he's done bad things, and there's nothing he can do to really change those, but he can at least try to make himself a better person, whether it actually happens or not.
I
just
think that's
feel
where we
like
fell. Was he
praying-
doesn't seem like he's trying to make himself better. He's just
Yeah.
trying to isolate each incident as, oh, that was bad. Oh well, next.
I think that's where it is for me. When I say his prayer is performative, his prayer is the extent of the effort he's made towards correcting what he identifies as evil behavior. He calls himself evil, he prays, he continues to do evil. What good is that prayer?
I just don't think that reaches even the bare minimum standard for trying to improve his who he is.
Commander Shepard, I am Nasana Dantius. I'm glad you're here. I must talk to you about my sister Dahlia. She's been kidnapped by slavers.
Dahlia's dead, Nasana, and I know she was blackmailing you.
And I was all set to try to manipulate you into hunting her down for me. But I guess that won't be necessary now, will it?
You wanted your sister dead?
If people found out my sister was a criminal, I'd be considered a security risk. They'd revoke my clearance or place me on administrative leave until she was apprehended. I shall transfer a little something into your account as a token of my appreciation.
He's still alive.
I can't feel my legs. My chest is killing me.
Who did this to you, and why?
We're just night workers. Nasana sent them after us. She sent the mechs to round us up, but we didn't hear. They just started shooting.
They just attacked you?
Yes, they were too slow. It was horrible. Everyone screaming. The mechs said there was no time. Nasana wanted us out of the way immediately. Then the dogs. Find the other workers. Help them.
Why would Nasana kill her own workers?
To her, we're expendable. But I didn't realize she was that ruthless. My friends, co-workers, slaughtered. They were jumping off ledges to escape the dogs.
Nasana had become paranoid. You saw the strength of her guard force. She believed one of her sisters would kill her.
Let's cut to the chase. I need you for a mission.
Indeed.
You're familiar with the Collectors?
By reputation.
They're abducting entire human colonies. Freedom's Progress was their handiwork.
I see. This was to be my last job. I'm dying. Low survival odds don't concern me. The abduction of your colonists does.
Is there anything I can do?
Giving me this opportunity is enough. The universe is a dark place. I'm trying to make it brighter before I die. Many innocents died today. I wasn't fast enough and they suffered. I must atone for that. I will work for you, Shepard. No charge.
I've heard impressive stories, Krios. Sounds like you'll be an asset to the team. That is, if you're comfortable having an assassin watch your back.
I've accepted a contract. My arm is Shepard's.
Uh-huh. Don't know about you, but I'm loyal to more than my next paycheck.
Obviously he is too. He's doing this mission gratis. What's your concern?
I don't like mercenaries. An assassin is just a precise mercenary.
An assassin is a weapon. A weapon doesn't choose to kill. The one who wields it does. Where shall I put my things? I'd prefer someplace dry if anything is available.
The area near the life support plant on the crew deck tends to be slightly more arid than the rest of the ship.
Ah, an AI. My thanks.
He seems quite civil.
We need all the help we can get. He's not what I expected in an assassin. He may surprise you.
Yeah, and he may not.
Well, how about we score Thane? What do we think?
I've already got him at S. I already said that at the beginning. So
For me, Thane is a B.
Me too.
So we have him as A.
Yep. I don't think he's uninteresting.
I guess I'm trying to figure out the average there. It'd be more of a
A minus.
A minus, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Just call it A for simplicity's sake. Yeah.
All right, so the next one that we're going to cover, it's going to complete our Mass Effect 2 list, is a character that I am not named after necessarily. My name came before this one came around, but it's appropriate. There's so many things I've been wanting to say about the Geth. Yeah. The Geth.
Banana's got them cynical eyes.
Yeah,
I did have a question if your name came from the same place that Legion's name came from.
No. Legion was always a gamer tag of mine, and I just had to throw the gray on there for Google, and it just somehow became everywhere. So anyway, but yeah, Legion. You find him at an interesting location, and before the Legendary came out, it was not everybody got to see the full lore of Legion, because you got to do his mission, but character arcs were, their loyalty stuff was locked behind how many missions you did with them. So not just the level. So when you when you got Legion and you did his loyalty, a lot of people just immediately went to the Reaper IFF, and then you pretty much are finishing the game at that point. So you don't have the opportunity to start talking to Legion. So even if you go in there and talk to him, now with the Legendary, it unlocks it. But if you knew that you were going to lose crew members if you didn't do that right away, again, you may not even have any missions to go to by that point. You may have done everything right before the Legion mission. But if you saved some and you actually did some of those things, you got to unlock a lot of those extra conversations that you have with Legion, which is pretty profound. You get to kind of hear how the Geth society actually works. And, you know, in a galaxy that is proven over and over and over every cycle, organics will eventually create an AI that will somehow self-destruct upon themselves. It happened over and over, and that's where the Reapers even came from, was this ideology, because the original race had to squash those over and over again. And so they decided to create a being that could do it for them. And unfortunately, it took them over. It said, hey, you guys are going to be the problem now. So it came full circle. But the point here is that AI is the problem. The Geth are different. The Geth are just somehow fundamentally different, that they're able to compare those things. And instead of going in a linear path of pure destruction, from the very beginning, we misunderstand them. They actually do not want that type of world. They want to coexist with everybody. And Legion is the only one who has the ability to observe that and independently make his own decisions, even though he doesn't always understand them. So I don't know about a score at this moment, but I'm thinking it's a hard A. But where do you guys stand on it?
I think Legion is such an interesting character. I think even the way they present his explanation for why there are Geth detractors, where he says, I forget exactly how he explains it, but it's along the lines of they come to a different result, or they come to the same result in a calculation, but it means something different.
Yeah.
And that's the dividing line between the Geth who side with the Reapers and the Geth who side with Organics, or the Geth who act independently of that other group. That's such an interesting way to present robotic thinking to somebody who can't rationalize that, somebody who couldn't possibly understand how you come to a different conclusion when your thought process is so rigid. It's so precisely defined. I feel like that explanation did such a great job in terms of the heavy lifting of establishing how you can get diversity in a platform where everything is shared. Legion was just immediately engaging.
Yeah, there's a lot to love in the character. I think one of my favorite little details is the idea that there is no individual. We are Geth, while simultaneously displaying what are clearly individualistic tendencies within himself. And I think it's really just their form of life not quite understanding what they are yet. So they're essentially reaching for easy conclusions, what they've been told they are, what they feel. They've been reaching for the idea that they are clearly a very linked society. Very linked. They shared all their software. They can essentially a part of each other. But they deny that individualism for the longest time. And even he does, whilst, like I say, showing these very individual ideas. And I love that. I love that divergence in Geth society where you have lazy terms, the good and the bad Geth from our perspective, and that really delicious justification for why. And I think this is about the Geth, but again, there is no individual, there's only Geth. The other thing I really like about the Geth is that they didn't just sort of suddenly turn on the Quarians. There's this misuse, there's this clumsiness with the technology that makes them what they are. It's not just this one day great robot uprising. There's much more to it. And it's really interesting. And and Legion offers what Tali offered in Mass Effect 1. He's our window onto this whole world that's really, really interesting. But he's not going to get a high mark from me, because he's such a missed opportunity, especially with the original setup for the game, where you miss all of his damn dialogue. You get such a short time with him. And that is the only real criticism I've got, because aside from that, I love Legion. I love Legion. I love having him in my party. I love listening to him. He's funny, which I didn't expect. There's some really genuinely laugh out loud lines that he gets. There's just a problem with the way, particularly in the original edition, you were not encouraged to spend time with him. In fact, you were actively encouraged to move the game on so that you could go and save everyone and not have them turn into liquid. And for purely execution, he's going to get dragged down.
I feel like we have just realized that the whole justification for this tier list was so that Legion could get sound clips of you and I saying, I love Legion. But
he's
I really
funny.
do. I
laugh out loud.
Yeah, I think Legion is such a fun kind of a thought experiment to present what is essentially a culture in its infancy that has a very different starting point from humanity, and to watch it grow and to watch it clash with something so foreign to them. We inherently have a sense of individuality. They don't. They reject the concept despite it manifesting. They are convinced that they are not individuals until they are, and it's undeniable. And I feel like it's just fun. It's this fun philosophical discussion to kind of evaluate where one ends and another begins, and how this society grows from that. It's so inherently engaging immediately, which is, I think, exactly why Com is so frustrated that you don't get to dig into it. It's so cool. It's such an interesting idea. Why aren't we meeting Legion immediately?
I'm going to actually end up giving like 2 rankings for Legion. It's going to be one where you get all of his dialogue and you get to have all the missions with him. In that case, he's right up there. He's hanging around with Morden up in that S rank. It's really just a technical level that pulls him down for me. But that what Banana was saying about the individual and the collective, it's exactly the opposite of a human. Exactly the opposite. For us, we would probably think, where do I as the individual end and society begin? For them, it's the exact opposite. It's where does our society end and where does this individual unit begin? And that's such a bizarre thought. Think of all that they could have done with that. And actually, they did a whole bunch.
They did a whole bunch.
You just didn't get to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's some. I mean, you're right. You didn't get to hear it, but the main conflict that pushes the Quarians against the Geth is when the one simply asks, "Does this unit have a soul?" But that means a lot. Number one, it's asking the question. Number two, it doesn't know what a soul is, and if it is cognizant of what a soul is, perhaps it is a soul. And so you as a Quarian race are, number one, not supposed to be making these things. You made it inadvertently, but now you got to deal with it. So either you deal with it from a destructive standpoint, or, which is what kind of like where the Quarians actually ultimately did, is that they were presented with this historical inaccuracy that basically the Geth rose up against the Quarians and they ousted them from their home planet. It's not really what happened. The Quarians just took some offensive sides of it and said, hey, look, we're going to shut these units down. And there were Quarians that actually tried to defend them. And in that defense, because they really did care for those Quarians that were protecting them, they pick up the rifle. And so Legion is supposed to be the first one. That's the impression. They don't say it, but he's supposed to be the first one who picks up that rifle. And then you say, hey, that rifle looks real familiar. It looks like the one that you were using when I first met you. He says, it's a very efficient model. So he doesn't acknowledge it, but that's him. And he's wearing the N7 armor. That's sentimental. He doesn't need that. And they ask, why did you could have worn anything else? There was a hole. Yeah, but you could have patched it. You could have worn something else. There was a hole. He doesn't know how to show that emotional side of things.
I think that is where that engagement is so expertly done, is you talk to Legion and you say these things that are so human, and he doesn't know how to relate. He doesn't know how to answer. He doesn't know how to communicate in terms that you know. And I think that ties back to that first question. Does this unit have a soul? They're asking for more information. They're asking to understand the things the way that Quarians do. And the Quarians refuse to let them. It's a knee-jerk reaction. It's somewhat understandable in those circumstances. But the reality is they chose not to educate them beyond that point. And that's where the problem started.
Yeah.
I think we see a different series of events play out if somebody just answers the question. And that's tied back to that moment where you meet Legion and you're asking him these questions and he's trying to give you an answer. He's just not capable. If the first Quarian said, I don't know, we can talk about it, we can try to figure it out, you're in the same position. Legion is inherently doing what could not be done for his people the first time you talk to him. He's trying harder than the first Quarians did for the Geth. And that's immediately why Legion is beloved for me.
There's One little extra tiny bit as well is when he says there was a hole. It's a very efficient model. There's also that plausible deniability that that's actually his reasoning behind it as well. And from Shepard's perspective, that's never going to be sufficient. From ours, that's never going to be. We know there's more behind the lines. But you can also imagine just someone who already goes in with the supposition that this Geth doesn't have any thoughts, that isn't really thinking outside of the collective. And that individual is just going to say, oh yeah, that's it. So you can also see just where society would struggle with this. People wouldn't be able to understand the way the Geth is speaking, the way the Geth is actually talking about what it's really feeling. And everything they do is just odd. And there was one little moment as well that I think doesn't get... Oh, we haven't mentioned, and I think it deserves a bit of credit. The first moment when you see Legion, or at least you think you do up in the distance, is really well done. I love that little image. Because the very first time I just saw him walking, and I was just thinking, okay, well, guess we'll find out. That few extra moments of anticipation before the reveal of what, and I'll say what instead of who, it actually was. Really well done. That's some of BioWare at their best.
I think they're especially sadistic, though, at the same time, because we all love Tally, and I think they understood that everybody really shouldn't be hating Tally. There's a good, strong character there. So if you've been siding with Tally, she's been with you through mostly thick and thin, then now you have to choose. You didn't expect to have this choice of a character that you're suddenly liking and appreciating in Legion. And, well, a Quarian is on board. A Quarian who has very strong opinions about the AI that is already on the ship. And that dynamic is done really well between those two. In so much so that you don't want to have to choose, but you know probably you're going to have to. And it leads to some really interesting conversations.
Yeah, I think that dynamic doesn't exist with any other Quarian. I think that the fact that Tally trusts you enough to give it a chance at all is unique to Tally. And that makes for the conclusion of that story to be so much more satisfying. Is the only reason that you can rectify the situation between the Geth and the Quarians is sadly because the Reapers exist. The only reason you meet Tally is because the Reapers exist. She becomes a part of your crew. She gives you a lot of insight into this situation. Then you meet Legion. You get the insight from the other side. And you recognize those commonalities. You recognize life in inorganic form. And you can encourage a relationship between people who have been displaced from their home by that new life form. And it's a video game. It's idealistic. The fact that you can rectify that situation at all is preposterous, but you can. And it's so wonderful.
I think we could do an entire podcast, at least for me, on the Geth alone. I've tried to create videos. It's just there's so much there. And I think doing anything less than a 3-hour video is going to be not really doing it justice. That's just me, But you can't, like, there are some companions we have, like Tally, Garrus, that you can't really speak about them without discussing their background and their race. But I think the same thing holds true for Legion. You can't talk about him without talking about the Geth. Because, yes, the Geth are a organism. And there's a running theme within Mass Effect. The collective, the Keepers. For the most part, the Prothean worked as one. There weren't factions. There was just one group of Protheans that ruled the galaxy. You have the Thorian. That's the whole collective thing. But anyway, you have a running theme over and over of the collective. And that's really the Geth, with the exception of Legion. He is a mobile unit, stands alone. He is able to communicate with them, but he is actually truly apart from them. So the way that in Mass Effect 3 pulls the Reaper, how they pull in the other heretics, is they use Legion as their fulcrum. And when you find him, he's in this crucified position. I think Bioware has really leaned on the Geth as being the pathway into whatever stories will come after Mass Effect 3. There's a lot there that shows that they are different from every other AI that has ever existed before. And they're more adaptable, and they understand things, and they're not bent on destruction. That they're actually trying to create a better galaxy. Just, it's never happened before with an AI, and so nobody trusts that to ever happen.
Yeah, I think when you're presented to the Geth through Legion, it's the first time you see an AI as capable of coming to the conclusion that coexistence is possible. I feel like when you read through the codex and you hear all of the other examples, the AI concluded it's either us or them. And that's how the cycle repeats itself. The Geth are the first AI that ever reaches the conclusion that it's either us or none of us.
Yeah.
And that's why Mass Effect 3, you get to break the cycle. I think it ties back to what I, in the previous episode, suggested the overarching theme of Mass Effect was commonality. Yeah. The idea that if you focus on what divides you, you'll find problems. If you focus on what brings you together, you'll find solutions. And I feel like that behavior in the Geth, to be the outlier, to reach a different conclusion with the same information, is the proof that commonality is the important part.
Yeah, and on that, I think we should also take, possibly with a pinch of salt, bearing in mind their defeat, the idea of the Prothean as well being that one collective, because ultimately we don't know. We have the archaeological record, we have the eyewitness testimony, if you will, of a Prothean who never saw the heyday, never saw actually what they were really like. Javik was born in ruins, wasn't he? He was born in fire and blood and his civilization collapsing around him. Maybe that's what took them down too, was that inability to actually form a genuine collective together. Maybe it was more of an illusionary togetherness in this way that something like the Western Roman Empire would have been in real life. You do have that common ground, common labeling. You might have a unified system, but down at ground level, you've got all of these differences. And maybe they had something like that too. And maybe this is the first time that we really have seen a genuine uniting of the galaxy and all of these species, and in this case, the synthetics as well.
Yeah, Javik actually refers to fighting AI in his day too. I mean, he says they were hard.
Yeah, he does.
And he says, that's why he says, throw it out the airlock, trust me. And so he fought the Rachni as well. And he says, they were hard in our time as well. They're tough.
I think you're presented with that information in Mass Effect 1. You meet Virgil. Virgil's not treated as an equal. Virgil is a tool.
Oh, yeah.
And Virgil makes the decision to cut life support to various cells because Virgil does not see himself as part of that collective. He's separate, and that enables that decision. It's not a decision that most organics would take as lightly as Virgil does.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you talk about the Geth, the more unique things you find, because even Edie, who's an AI, is baffled by how complex the Geth are, because she integrates with Legion for just a little bit. She's like, what was that? She's like, that was like billions of voices, but all at one time, and everybody understanding everything at the same time.
So where are we then with our rankings?
I mean, I still have him as an A. I would like to, like you said, meet him earlier and then be able to like do some things, but it's really the tail end of 2, and you don't really get any in 3 as a squad mate.
I'm going to go higher than I initially thought. I'm going to give a bit more credit to the character. I'm going to think of it in almost the best version possible, but I do feel S is just too generous because that flaw is still there. So I'm going to go A as well.
A, just because you can't get a romance with him. But no, I'd say A,
once again,
for that exact reason, that you don't get enough Legion, and it's a game design flaw. It's not a Legion flaw.
Yeah, very much. This is not a criticism of the character from my perspective. It is purely, which is why he goes so high, because he does so much to counteract this.
Mm-hmm.
Just that little design flaw keeps him from an S.
We get 14 hours of Jacob and 1 hour of Legion. Just doesn't sound right.
Would have been a
Gotta
bold
write a
choice.
mod where if you kill Jacob at the first mission, you meet Legion immediately.
Can you imagine how bold that choice would have been to start the game? It's Legion waking you up. Imagine that. What the fuck's happening?
I feel like that could have worked, but it would have been horrifying initially. I mean, horrifying for Shep.
Did Legion just go Shepard Commander?
Yeah.
The other thing that I
would
missed,
just imagine
actually,
Legion looking up an alarm clock noise and playing that at you.
This seems to work.
There was one thing that I wanted to point out about Legion and the Geth that I feel like we kind of gently brushed against but didn't go into in detail, and I think it's part of my struggles in society. Legion essentially represents an inability to effectively communicate and the catastrophic result that comes from that. And it's showcased very much in that conversation that he has with Shepard. Not so much the catastrophic results, but the answering the question that's asked and not the question that's intended. That is a very real problem. And I've been in that situation before, where somebody asks me a question and I give them the answer to that question, and they ask me the question again. At a certain point, both sides need to recognize the disconnect. You're not asking the question you think you are, and I'm not hearing the question you want me to. We both need to move together to gain that understanding. And I'm now realizing much later that's one of the reasons that I gravitated to Legion.
I thought you were going to say that's one of the reasons why we were talking about Thane for such a long time.
I mean, it kind of is.
Yeah. One interesting mission is his loyalty mission, where you get to manipulate the remaining Geth to either your side of thinking or let them go back where they were. It was not an option that he had before. Before, he was just going to handle the server. But it presented itself as an option, and he gives you that. It's not like he just uploaded his opinion of it. He says, what do you want to do with this? And the interesting thing about that is if you watch other people play it, you get a lot of divided opinions on that. It's like, oh, well, they're people, so why would we want to manipulate their mind? Are they people? And so now you're saying that they're people. And that's a big step. It's a little bit, you're saying more than what you think that you may be saying. So now you have to give them independence.
I feel like that ties back to what you've said. The overarching theme of Mass Effect is control. Do you want to convince someone, or do you want them just to agree with you? And that's ultimately that question is, do you want people to come around to your way of thinking on their own? Or are you so certain that your way of thinking is right that you just want to inject that way of thinking into these people? And I think that's exactly why you get differing opinions at that choice.
Like I said, it seems like a surface level decision, but when you start saying that these are people that were manipulating them, wait a minute, this whole time, this whole game up to this point, we're not calling them people. There's nothing that's really changed fundamentally to make us think that, other than just meeting Legion, who is not part of that faction. He's not part of the heretics. To him, that they're just as different, even though they're just a bit digitally off from the calculations that they come down to. But he sees them as a very different group than the ones that, think like he does.
The other thing that I can't believe no one ever did at any point was that no one did an impression of Grunt's little laugh, which made me sad as well. The little her, because it's one of my favorite sounds in the whole series.
There you go. You got that nailed down.
Well, now we got it.
Yeah.
You just edit that in, spice it now and again, just put a little on top here and there.